we've assembled a great group of leaders and experts in the industry, and we're here to talk about the Hispanic market, Hispanic entrepreneurs, and in tech as well. And by no means, we want to make sure that this is a conversation amongst friends that we would have in the living room. So make sure that you interact as much as you want to. And if you have any questions, you can ask of the panelists directly. I'm not going to get offended. But my name is Augusto Sanabria. I'm the president and CEO of Prospera. Prospera is an organization that helps Hispanic entrepreneurs that want to start businesses. We offer services throughout the state of Florida and in the state of North Carolina as well. And so I am here today to kind of set the stage and be able to get you as much information as we can about the Hispanic community, about tech startups, government, elected officials, and a lot of other interesting things. So here to my left, I have one of our City of Orlando stars, entrepreneurs, and as a fellow Hispanics, we're very proud to have Carlos as a member of our community and kind of leading the way in the whole tech startup work. So Carlos is the CEO of Echo Interaction Group. And again, and I'm not going to go big on the introductions. You guys can see in the app there was some information. If not, you can look it up. But I really want to get into the meat of the program so that you can get a few nuggets out of the session. Then to his left, we have Vanessa. Vanessa is the Director of Business Development and Marketing for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Metro Orlando. Many of you may not know that the Hispanic Chamber here in Metro Orlando is one of the largest Hispanic chambers in the nation. And it is actually the largest chamber in the Central Florida region. So Vanessa is going to help us talk about how to reach the Hispanic market and how big companies and large businesses are reaching the Hispanic market. And then to her left, we have Jose Gonzalez. Jose Gonzalez is the Director of Government and Industry Relations for Walt Disney World here in Orlando. He's a good friend of ours and very savvy when it comes to the elected officials, elections, and everything politically driven. Jose was before being with Disney, he was with Anheuser-Busch as well and lived in Tallahassee, so very in tune with what's going on in politics as well. So without further ado, let me start with Vanessa. Ladies first. My mom always told me, and I always had two sisters as well, so ladies always go first. But Vanessa, tell me a little bit about the growth of the Hispanic market here in Central Florida, and how is the Chamber helping companies? I know that you have a lot of the big companies involved at the Chamber. What are you guys doing to help them connect with the Hispanic market?
Thank you, Augusto. Well, before I begin, I want to give a special thanks to Synapse Orlando for this invitation, and especially to Carlos to making sure that you include this program in this event, as it's so important, this type of data that we're going to be sharing with you today. So let's talk about the growth of the Hispanic community in Central Florida. This growth historically, if we go back, it's been that South Florida, it's been the hot spot for Hispanics, Latinos, the influence, but things are changing. Right now, the big migration of Puerto Ricans and other Latin American countries are coming to Central Florida and making Central Florida their homes. So right now, I'm going to be sharing a couple of interesting data. And currently, 1 out of 4 Floridians are Hispanic here in the state of Florida, making it the 3rd largest Hispanic population in the United States. So now, let's talk about Central Florida, because we live here, and this ratio is even getting closer. So right now, it's 1 in 3 people are Hispanic. So just, let's talk about a little bit about that so you have that in mind. And that's why here at the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we are very, very efficient when it comes to how do we connect these big corporations or even small businesses with the Hispanic businesses in Central Florida. So I'm going to give you a little bit more information about the Chamber, even though Augusto already kind of mentioned a couple of highlights of what we do. But for over 26 years, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Metro Orlando has been the leading voice of the Hispanic business community, providing leadership and support to the economics development of the Hispanic business community here in Central Florida. And like he said, we have more than 1,500 members. We're one of the largest chamber in the nation. And a lot of people think that, oh, the Hispanic Chamber probably, they have a lot of, Hispanic businesses. And yes, we do have a lot of Hispanic businesses, but also we have a lot of non-Hispanics because they want to connect with the Hispanic businesses. So I would say that our membership, it's comprised of 40% non-Hispanic and 60% Hispanic. So that's something for you to consider, as that's why a lot of people are joining the Hispanic Chamber, because they want to connect with this type of businesses. So we concentrate in 4 areas. Those areas are connectivity, which a lot of networking. We do professional development. We do profit generator. And also we do the part of business exposure as any other chamber. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about connectivity, because again, how do we connect small businesses, startup companies, Hispanic startup companies with these corporations that are trying to reach the Hispanic market? We have one of our main programs at the Hispanic Chamber, which is the Supplier Diversity Council. And this group, it's around 20 to 25 leaders and representatives from corporations in the procurement department, where they educate these businesses that are trying to grow sustainable business and also, have a stronger foundation when they're starting or even when they're already established. So we have workshops every 3 months, just trying to really educate them about how to win contracts when you are talking to corporations or other small businesses. For example, last month we had one about how to create a captivating capability statement. And we all know it's kind of like a resume. Everyone has that, one, but how do you make it attractive when you are trying to win contracts? So that's one of the examples of the type of workshops that we provide with the Supplier Diversity. Also, we prepare them. So we have the how to become a minority certified business. So what we do is that we reimburse the cost, because it has a cost to become minority certified. So we are making sure that the businesses are being prepared. And then again, the connectivity. We want to make sure that these businesses are exposed with the right connections. So in every type of workshop that we provide, we have decision makers. Decision makers are the ones that provide the workshop. And also we have the supplier diversity matchmaking that we have at the Hispanic Business Conference. We have it every May. And then it's a great segment where you can connect with these corporations. So basically, we do the whole cycle. We prepare you, we educate you, and then we expose you in front of this, businesses that they're trying to look for diverse-owned businesses in the community. So that I just really wanted to talk about that program, because a lot of organizations, a lot of corporations, they don't know that that's what the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce is doing in the community. And also, I wanted to highlight, and I know a couple of you attended that event. We have one of our main signature events, which is the Hispanic Economic Impact Summit, and it happened just last week on October 10th. And that is an event that it's data research centric event, where we provide a lot of really, really good data in terms of, what's going to happen the next 10 years. So we talked about the reshaping the Hispanic future here in Central Florida, the opportunity, and also the hot topic, the Latinx opportunity. So today I want to share with you a couple of data, and I'm going to be pretty quick. And this is interesting because I know a lot of you didn't go. And the good thing is that we're going to be sharing this data in a couple of months, just, all in just one packet. But I wanted to share with you a couple of highlights. So since 2013, the Hispanic population growth represents more than 53% of total population growth in Florida and 60% of Orlando's area. Those are big numbers right there. The Hispanics are responsible for 82% of the growth of the U.S. labor force since the Great Recession. And Hispanics are the only demographic to have increased their rate of home ownership for the past 4 consecutive years. So again, these are a couple of data that I wanted to share with you, and I cannot forget the last one, which has been the trending one, which is the Latinx, which represents a long term of return on investment for brands, and the median age is 28 years, which is way younger than the average median age for non-Hispanics. So I'm just going to close this question with, by 2023, the buying power of the U.S. Latinx population is expected to top $1.9 trillion. So.
Yep. Thank you, Vanessa, for all of that. And hopefully you can get a few nuggets that you can take back to your places or your businesses. But one of the things that we sometimes lose, there are about 4.3 million Hispanic-owned businesses in the U.S. generating about $900 billion in sales. And we start more businesses, but we also fail more, because of mistakes that we make at the beginning stages of our companies. And the other piece is we are less scalable than non-Hispanics. Only 1.8% of Hispanic-owned firms reach $1 million in sales, which is drastically low. And so when you look at average revenue for Hispanic businesses versus non-Hispanics, if we would do better at increasing those average sales for Hispanic-owned businesses to be similar to those of non-Hispanics, that is a $1.3 trillion opportunity for the U.S. economy. So when you are not Hispanics and you're thinking out there, why should I care, or why should I help, or why should I get involved in the Hispanic Chamber or helping Hispanic businesses, there is a $1.3 trillion economic opportunity for the U.S. That means more jobs, that means better jobs, that means a more diverse economy, closing income gaps, less people depending on government programs. And so all of these are reasons why you should care in your own community. And so talking about success rate and how many Hispanics start businesses, but we also fail. We have a perfect example of one of those who has made it and has been successful here in Carlos. So Carlos, share with the audience, what was your experience starting a business as an immigrant and as a Latino yourself, and what were the struggles? What was the story like?
Thanks. Is this on?
Yeah.
Number one, and a lot of us Hispanics, we don't lead with that identity. So I as an entrepreneur, and entrepreneurs here will appreciate the statement that I don't wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, look at that Hispanic guy looking at me. I think of myself as an entrepreneur first. And entrepreneurs look for opportunity and see something where others don't. So that's what I did first when I started my company. But very early on, you start thinking about issues related to funding, cash flow, which direction you're going to go. And one of the reasons why perhaps, and this isn't just observational research, this is actual data, that Hispanics tend to not have the ability to have that initial friends and family round of funding, because even if they're first or second generation, because the accumulation of wealth has not happened within their families or their peer groups. And that's typically what happens when you have a startup, when you have a company, whether it's in tech or not, actually. So that was also an impediment for me. I'm actually not even first generation. I'm a naturalized citizen. I became a citizen when I was 23. So I put myself through college. I did all those typical things that immigrants do to, make it in America. Mm-hmm. And once you start a business, then you necessarily don't have a lot of family members who have started businesses. So you don't have that role modeling. But for me, I found opportunity. I found opportunity within the realm of digital first, digital marketing, and then mobile application and software development, and now augmented reality in the world of mixed reality and extended reality. But for those of you in the audience, the opportunity lies in the fact that Hispanics start businesses at higher rates than other groups. Hispanics, like Vanessa said, they're a growing population, so therefore you start extrapolating, those numbers, and if you're an investor or a funder, there's more opportunity there. Yes, Hispanic companies tend to not be as scalable, but they're very moldable, and that means that with mentorship, they could get there. I went through an incredible program at Stanford which helped me actually pivot into AR, and it was actually identify companies that were second stage, yeah, Latino-owned, over $1 million, that had the potential for scalability, and they are systematically educating this group of entrepreneurs throughout the country. About 500 of us have already, or the aim is to have 500 of us go through that program, and it's already up to 300. So again, we have the opportunity to assist other companies or companies who are Latino-owned to achieve full scalability. And why this is important to everybody? Because it's a national imperative to make sure that Latino-owned companies succeed and the Hispanic community or population succeeds. Because the data shows that by virtue of larger families and immigration, we are going to be one of the largest groups here, and the numbers show that it's beating. We'll see the census, and I know we'll talk about it a little bit. It's going to have some really telling information that forecasts are probably not even going to have expected the rate of population growth. And if we have a group of people that traditionally, we actually, not to be all negative, but out of every single group, Hispanics actually have lower high school graduation rates, college attendance, and all these other issues that prevent us, we go into STEM careers at less rates, lower rates than other groups. So therefore, but think about it, but we start businesses at higher rates. So what's happening? We probably have people that are not necessarily equipped or prepared or starting companies that are in the tech world or tech enabled. So we're by default potentially not going to be prepared for the onslaught of the automation and AI and how that's going to transform society and the world. And that's going to be a big percentage of our population in the U.S. So it should be an imperative that we focus on that population. The other opportunity is that if you're a marketer, if you have a startup and you're putting out a product, this is an audience that is extremely brand loyal. It's growing. It actually, in some of this data is, it's like a paradox, right? Because you would think that we're potentially less educated or other things that don't lead to the notion that we're tech savvy. But Hispanics also adopt broadband access at higher rates. Actually are early adopters of technology. I mean, this sounds like a joke, but WhatsApp, everybody uses WhatsApp now. Latinos have been using WhatsApp for a very long time. If everybody knows, we have our WhatsApp groups and all that whatnot, chatter. And it's because we needed it out of necessity. Smartphone adoption rate, same thing, higher. Because for us, that was our TV, our computer, our phone, everything. And again, we have to communicate in an affordable manner with people in other countries or everywhere. It's said that Hispanic middle-aged women communicate with over 60 people daily. So again, anyone starting a communication type platform or startup, then target the Hispanic community. So all these opportunities are there, and we just have to be aware of them. And I know that for me, I try to educate some of my clients about that, but I think it's something that we all should pay attention to.
And a few of those nuggets of information that Carlos mentioned there. So the latest U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce reports that 70% of Hispanic small business owners are under the age of 45. That's pretty interesting. At a national level, according to the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship, which is that program that you went through, 86% of scale immigrant-owned firms with revenues over $1 million are owned by millennials who immigrated as children. And that is something else that it's important to talk about as we look at, for most of us, and I think all of us in this panel weren't born here in the U.S., correct? Yeah, we were all born in Latin America. And so we become Hispanic once we set foot here, right? I mean, before that, we were Panamanian, Venezuelan.
I thought I was white until I...
That's a good point, right? Yeah. And so, when you say Hispanic, you're really talking about 23 different countries and nationalities with 23 different backgrounds, and we have Brazilians who speak Portuguese, obviously. And so it is a medley of a lot of cultures, a lot of different backgrounds, educational, attainment, economic, and socioeconomic. And so when you get here and you're all of a sudden you're one of the same, right? It's kind of a transition, but it is interesting to see how now the second generation of Hispanics, so those that my kids or those who were born here, have a different mentality and have different needs, different wants. They Americanize a lot easier than the transition that we had to do. But you weren't born here, Carlos. So what was, outside of the friends and family, you mentioned capital was an important thing. What else kind of, and obviously now you're successful, but revert back to those days when you were struggling to start. What were some of those pain points that you had or that were difficult to understand when you were starting up?
I think, and again, anybody who knows me, I love Orlando. I'll defend Orlando to the death. But in certain regions, especially if you're not part of the established business community, it's hard to break through and break in and be seen as relevant. And I think that was the struggle that I had initially. I would join, groups and the Citrus Club or whatever the case may be, and it seemed like there was this old guard and this almost oligarchy here where, if you weren't part of it, or if you were young, or if you were, again, a person of color or immigrant or Latino, that you weren't really paid attention to. And I think that in the world of business, you could have the best marketing campaign, but if you don't make inroads with your backyard and the business community, you don't network and have those alliances and partnerships, you're not going to succeed.
Correct.
So I think for those of us back then here, it's changed. This is a very collaborative community, but I'm certain that people in Hispanics in other regions potentially are just feeling the same way.
Yeah.
And it's just something that again potentially it'll change. And a lot of Hispanics, unlike other groups, we kind of try to pass, right? Like they still have an accent, and nobody mistakes me for. My name is Carlos, right? But you kind of try to, quietly do your work and don't make a lot of noise, and that's how you used to be, especially if you, reach certain levels in the corporate world, and then, even when you are an entrepreneur and start your business. But I think hopefully now we can, again, because we're going to have I shouldn't say the upper hand, but we're going to have the ability to help others connect with Hispanics. Yeah. So I think that we should lead with that potential know-how.
And so talking about the upper hand and understanding the community and the numbers, obviously we are entering 2020, Jose, which is going to be a big year in terms of politics, not only at the federal level, which everyone is kind of in tune to, but also at the state and local level. And so how do you, and you've been in government relations for many years, and you've helped individuals get elected and other things. And so how have you seen the landscape change? What are those conversations that you're having now looking into 2020?
Yep, thank you. Check, was this on?
Yeah.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon. And thanks, Augusto and Carlos and Vanessa, for allowing me to be a part of this panel. So we've talked there's a lot of synergies and a lot of parallels to what we've been discussing as it relates to government, right? And the landscape has changed tremendously. This will be my 17th legislative session that I'll be working in Tallahassee, right? And, when I first got to Tallahassee in the late 90s, there were not a lot of Hispanic lobbyists. There were not a lot of organizations that were going up to Tallahassee to lobby. Obviously, Tallahassee has a long way to go before it gets to cities like Orlando and Miami and Tampa in terms of sort of the way their worldview, right? And so people like Augusto really is a trailblazer. His organization was one of the first Hispanic organizations to start traveling to Tallahassee to lobby for state, funds for his organization, right? And I remember being in those early meetings and we had to explain why it was important to provide, funding for a program as valuable as Prospera, who was helping folks, start companies and create jobs. And, it took us a couple of years, right? Oh, yeah. And so, I think, obviously, with Vanessa was talking about some of the population trends. Again, when I first started in Tallahassee, the majority of the Hispanic elected officials were Cuban from Miami, and as many of you know, that population tends to be Republican and conservative. But over the years, that has shifted tremendously, right? With the growth of people coming from other parts of South America and Central America. And so you have really seen South Florida become a lot more purple. And you've seen that balance has shifted in terms of the number of Democrats that are coming into the legislature who are Hispanic Democrats. Obviously here in Central Florida, since the population here tends to be more of a Puerto Rican background and those folks tend to vote more Democratic, those members have also, their numbers have been growing, right, in the last couple of years just because of the shifts in population. right now, they're out of the total 160 members of the legislature, there's 24 that are Hispanic. So that's 15% of the legislature. So that's below the average of our sort of general population, right? I certainly expect that to change and grow, just because, and somebody mentioned the census, that's going to be hugely impactful. The next census, I think we're going to see at least another 2 districts in Central Florida that could be held by Hispanics, right, because of the growth of Hispanics in Central Florida. And so, as our population continues to grow, so will our representation in Tallahassee. The one thing where Hispanics are lagging is in their voter turnout, right? And I think, it's unfortunate because while our numbers are growing, our buying power is growing, our influence is growing, we're not seeing that level of involvement in our political process, right? And so that's an area or an opportunity, right?
And Jose, let me ask you something, a follow-up. So yeah, you mentioned, older Cubans in South Florida tend to be more Republican. Cubans in Tampa tend to be more Democratic. Puerto Ricans tend to be more Democratic. That doesn't work out that way in every election. Have you seen elected officials say, the heck with it, it's too complicated. They go left, they go right. It's kind of, what are you seeing the tendencies, or how are they addressing that?
There's a great case study for this question. Thank you, Augusto. You didn't see my notes, but you walked right into one of the things I wanted to talk about. So in this past election cycle, when Rick Scott, our former governor, was running for the U.S. Senate, if you guys may have noticed, if you lived in Orlando, you probably did, or if you are from Puerto Rico, you probably realize that as well. He spent an incredible amount of time on the island of Puerto Rico, meeting with Puerto Ricans, meeting with government officials, listening to Puerto Ricans on the island. Obviously, some of that was due to Maria in 2017. His administration sort of bent over backwards to help the Puerto Rican community that came to the mainland after Maria. And you can make a case that, and his margin of victory was really, really, really tight. I think it was less than 2% that he defeated Bill Nelson for the U.S. Senate. And, in counties like Osceola, where 20,000 more Puerto Ricans moved into that area, he spent a ton of time in Osceola. And he performed, I think, got 36% of the vote in Osceola County. Trump only got 24% of the vote. And so the time and the resources and the energy that he spent in that community, you can make an argument that it helped him win that U.S. Senate seat. So yeah, I think in the future, if you're smart and if you're running for statewide office, you need to engage the Hispanic community the way that Rick Scott did. And you may like Rick Scott, you may not, but that's just sort of the reality that's out there.
Yeah. And, pivoting a little bit back to more the entrepreneur and an issue that you mentioned, Carlos, and that is very prominent in our networks as we are building entrepreneurial ecosystems across the state and in other parts of the country. Capital is a huge issue in entrepreneurship. Many of you probably can relate. Capital for startups is almost a fantasy land or ride from Disney, right? Jose, no pun intended. But it's very difficult to get capital when you're starting your companies. I mean, you referenced that, Carlos. But we've found that Hispanic business owners struggle to get capital in any of the cycles that they are. Even for folks that are like you past that startup phase, it is still demonstrated that they are underbanked, are undercapitalized. And when you talk about the tech entrepreneurship, VC capital, less than 1% of VC capital goes to Hispanic-owned firms, especially Latina-owned firms. Now, we all know, and hopefully you do know, Latina-owned companies are the fastest growing segment in the US. So they start businesses 4-to-1 ratio versus non-Hispanic women. And guess what? They're more successful than their male counterparts. And, we can probably put together a panel about why that is true, or Vanessa may, you're laughing there, obviously you're proud of that. They are more successful, they're starting more companies, they're starting a lot more in tech. Actually, you said that educational attainment rate, especially in college, is we're lagging in that, but guess who's leading from our group is Latina women. There are more women now that are in the education in universities getting baccalaureate degrees, doctorates, etc. So let's talk about this capital issue. What have you seen, Vanessa, the chamber? Obviously you have 1,500 members. Many of those are small businesses, are startups, and obviously you've had experience in business consulting as well. What do you see is that gap, or why is it that we can't get those loans as Hispanic business owners?
That's a really, really good question. And I'm going to give you a little bit of, more of a personal story. As I started my career, I've always been extremely passionate about helping Hispanic businesses. My parents are actually entrepreneurs. And back in Venezuela, I'm from Venezuela, they were entrepreneurs, very, successful, I would say. And then when you move here, you look for better opportunities, and you always take that mentality of, I need to be an entrepreneur. Why? Because, you need to learn a new language. So going for the route sometimes of being an entrepreneur, and even that's what you used to do at your country, it's, the most comfortable route. So you go and you're like, okay, I have my capital, I have my idea, it's the same idea I had in my country, so I'm gonna implement it in the United States. It's probably even gonna be more successful because, there's so much opportunity in this country. So you go and you open the business, and maybe you don't get, any consulting or anything. You just go because that's what you did in your country and it was successful. And it's sad to see when, a lot of families, they take that route, or entrepreneurs, because it's just, it takes a little bit of more of the educational part of understanding the market. So as soon as I saw that story that happened, with my parents, they actually opened 3 businesses and failed 3 businesses as soon as we got to the country. I'm like, no, I need to help in this matter, because, there has to be a reason why this is, it doesn't work out. Apart from maybe the language, there has to be something different. So, as I started my career, I got really passionate about learning. I got into consulting, and then I started to see that, that common denominator, that, seeing so many clients, almost, 1,000 clients a year, and it's just the fact that, they don't know how to do business here. They might have the perfect idea, they might have, even part of capital, but the reality is when you come to this country, you sometimes need more capital in order to start. And then, but again, you don't know how to do business here. You don't know, you don't have the connections. You don't know maybe, the key people. You don't know what to do, the right connections that you should be doing compared to the wrong connections. So that's something that I started seeing, and then I saw it more, into getting the loans, that why it was affecting so much. And it's, again, a lot of the people that come from other countries, it's apart from the language barrier, they don't know that, you need to have a business plan, that you need to have everything organized, that the experience that you had in your country, it doesn't count here, unfortunately. Unless you have, the right connections, and then you work on that. And also the credit score. Sometimes the credit score. In other countries, having debt is bad. It's like you don't want to have debt because you prefer to pay everything cash. So when you come here, the story, as we all know, it's different. And then, you start seeing. But I see that, we're going to start seeing positive changes into the loans, because, again, that median age, those 28, 29-year-old, that they're starting their business, that they're already professionals. They're gonna have that type of knowledge. And now that, I'm on the side of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, we work so close with Prospera, which actually that's where I got my experience working as a business, as a consultant. And then we work closely with them because they help those people that are coming into this country and really taking them hand to hand into the right process of getting, a loan, or having just, maybe not tomorrow you get the loan, but maybe in the future, how to prepare you for you to be successful when you're opening a business.
And that is a good one, Vanessa, that credit system that exists here in this country, and many of you would know that it's not a perfect system, right? And even us who are used to it, we're still struggling to understand fully what does that score mean, right? And how can you improve it? And so imagine coming from another country and not really having that system at all. In terms of venture capital, you're in the tech movement, not only as a business owner yourself, but you've been part of the tech movement here in Orlando as well. What have you seen in terms of your anecdotal, people that you see around? Why are they struggling to get venture capital? I mean, I know that we're struggling as Orlando to get venture capital to come more here, but why do you think Hispanics struggle more getting that capital?
Well, again, and we often don't talk about this, and we see Mark Zuckerberg and the movie that depicts he just casually waltzes in with a bathrobe and gets money handed to him. I mean, the reason is because he was well connected to begin with, and again, going back to these constructs where we think that talent and talent alone is what gets us VC funding is a total fallacy. It still boils down to connections. And then something that we don't talk about is that there is subconscious bias that plays into it, where you could go ahead and compare somebody who has equal amount of talent, and despite what everybody thinks about affirmative action or whatever the case may be, quotas or anything is, people are going to perceive somebody, and it happens to other groups as well, somebody who doesn't have an accent, is not of color, is not a woman, to potentially be more successful, and that happens. And the reason why it happens is because if you see who leads VC groups, they are predominantly white men of a certain age. Nothing against y'all, but that in itself leads to the fact that they're potentially not going to do the right outreach. They're just not going to connect. Somebody who invests in a company, that's another fallacy. They don't invest in the product or potential, because that potential lies in the actual founder. Mm-hmm. So if they don't connect personally with the founder, then it's not going to happen. This is a fact that maybe fact check me, because it may have changed, but there are angel groups, VC funding groups for every single, even for African American LGBTQ women. But there are no VC groups, angel groups that specifically target or serve the Hispanic population. Mm-hmm. So what does that tell you? Silicon Valley, you can't name one very high up top executive in one of the major tech firms, or a tech founder that's had an exit who happens to be Hispanic over in Silicon Valley, which is, again, the reason why Stanford started the program that they started. So I think that if you're a VC funder, there's an opportunity. You have to, there's talent there. Investing in startups, it's a gamble. 1 in 10 is going to succeed. So if you have to go ahead and spread the wealth and try to find talent and who's potentially going to be successful, and there aren't other angel groups or VC funders targeting the Hispanic population, then if you're the only one that's doing it, then you have a chance of having an interesting product or a company to invest in that no one else is going to be investing in.
And I saw the other day that 1 in 3 companies get VC funding in Silicon Valley. So 1 of 3 companies get funded. Think about that. Here in Florida is 1 out of 75. So, obviously that's a bad stat, right? We want to do better. We want more of our entrepreneurs to get that capital. But think about it from the investor perspective. You have 75 companies to choose from. You only have 3 in Silicon Valley that you have to actually compete. So your investment is actually a lot safer here in Florida than it probably is in over there in Silicon Valley. So.
Yeah, and actually, South Florida, now there's a group of people that started a fund to invest in Latin American-based companies. Mm-hmm. So sometimes the investment stays there. Sometimes, hopefully, they come stateside, but they're already doing that. Yeah. So if they're seeing that there is that potential with the Latin bloc, the Latin American bloc, then why not do it stateside
Yeah.
and try to see if maybe there's a potential for connectivity between a company that started here and targeting that huge demographic and that huge market.
So we have 5 minutes left, so we're going to start the lightning round. Are you guys ready? So this is the lightning round. So Carlos, one thing that a community can do to attract more Hispanics in the tech industry to start businesses, to get involved, how does a community attract more folks like you who are Hispanic in tech? One nugget. One piece of advice.
Okay, it's going to be long and drawn out, run-on sentence. I think that if you're a VC funder, a stakeholder, have a deliberate, be very deliberate about targeting Hispanic-owned companies and Latino-owned companies and lead with that. Also, if you're an existing company, startup or established company, partner, hire, and invest in Latino-owned companies. If you're a marketer, to make a deliberate attempt at targeting and marketing to the Hispanic community, you will have a loyal market. If you're an employer, hire Latino, Hispanic talent because they're going to give you the advantage over other marketers.
Thank you. Vanessa, lightning round. I'm going to change the question for you, so don't look at your notes too much. I'm a non-Hispanic firm, large or small. I want to attract Hispanic consumers to my business. What is the one piece of information that you could share, or one nugget of advice that you would give them of how to reach the Hispanic consumer?
I mean, if we're talking about marketing, I just wanted to mention a couple of things of what not to do, because we see a lot of common mistakes, and it's relying on stereotypes instead of the cultural insights. That's a big one. And also, bad translation. Are no bueno, we know that it's that's a big turn off when you see that. And then marketing to Hispanics without a multicultural staff. That's you need to close the cycle. You cannot just do the advertisement and then not have anyone answering the phone. And it doesn't have to be only in Spanish. It's just the cultural part that it needs to be there. And lastly, if it's in Spanish, I'm reaching out all the Hispanic market. That's wrong too. According to a Forbes article, and I love data, 44% of Hispanics say they only consume online content in English. So you cannot leave that market. Those millennials that have been here for a while and they're bilingual, because then you're not connected with them. So I just wanted to leave with that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Jose, so Joe Smith is running for office next year, 2020. How do they reach the Hispanic electorate? How do they reach the market?
I think, and this has been said already, social, the amount of social content that Hispanics consume is obviously very, very high. So if you're not, campaigning to Hispanics on social media, you're losing. I would say radio. We heard about this at the summit. Hispanics they still consume a lot of radio, FM radio, which a lot of other communities have kind of abandoned. So, I would say be strategic in terms of sending your message on radio. And I think, again, with good translation and being cultural. So those two mediums, I think.
What is the number one issue that Hispanics vote for, Jose? Because many people think it's immigration, but...
Yeah, it's not, and I've got, we've seen some polling on it. It really isn't immigration. It's really education and the economy, right? Because Hispanics are like everybody else. We're not different. We want our kids to do better than we did. So, education messages are really the most important for Hispanics.
Well, our time is up, so I want to thank all of you for listening, for being a great audience. Yeah.